if you want to, you can customize the deployment of the native Windows 11 start menu. But as you just said, you've got to open a file. It's quote unquote coding, right? It's not a pretty drag and drop interface. Is it XAML that they use these days? GPO objects don't really work at too much anymore because Microsoft seems to be moving away from that. So what Start 11 is quite effectively a better mousetrap for managing the start menu across your entire fleet. So what you do is you develop a start menu, and it's just all drag and drop. Pick your options, point your links wherever you want them: SharePoint sites, OneDrive, Dropbox, all that stuff. You develop a start menu. Then there's an export button that kicks out a single file. And so what you do is on your endpoints, you install Start 11, and then we have an enterprise deployment tooling where you just point the link to where you want it to ingest.
Hello, everybody, and welcome to this edition of Petri Dish. I'm very happy to say that we have Brad Helms with us today, who is General Manager of Stardock. Hi, Brad. How are you doing?
Doing well. Thanks for the invite. It's good to be chatting. It's been a while since we've talked last, but it's good to be chatting
It's
again.
been a while. It has been a while, yeah. So, what is the problem with Windows 11? So I think we all know that it hasn't been quite the success that Microsoft hoped that it was going to be.
Yeah.
Users perceive that there's some kind of problem with it. But what is that exactly? Why are users not embracing Windows 11 in quite
So
the way Microsoft
the
had hoped?
I think the primary, and it's a evolving narrative, if you will, because over time, when Windows 11 first launched, it was a slightly different beast than it is today. But a lot of the crux of the issue here is that Windows 11, first and foremost, requires a higher level benchmark of hardware. Right, you have to have a TPM chip that is compatible. So people who have what were high-end devices running Windows 10 suddenly find themselves like, "Hey, Microsoft is not going to support my hardware that I spent thousands of dollars on that runs Windows 10 just fine on Windows 11." So that was like the first sort of like, okay, so they're doing this. And then it really evolved into Microsoft did a lot of changes in Windows 11 from a top level, if you will. First off, the start menu got totally overhauled. There's a legion of people who were very tied to the live tiles. Those got completely cut out, and all the infrastructure that went with that. And then they completely rewrote the taskbar, which was, I understand why they did it, but they didn't get all the features back into the taskbar when they launched Windows 11. So from like early adopters, it was like, okay, the Windows menu start menu has changed, the taskbar is worse, and I have to have higher level of hardware. And so that really sort of soured the initial release of Windows 11 a few years ago.
Okay. But as you said, they've been making lots of changes to Windows 11. How long has it been out now? 3, 4 years? I don't even remember. But have they addressed a lot of those initial complaints, or are we still in a position where there are lots of regressions, if you like, from Windows
I think
11?
it depends where you stand, because like everything that Microsoft does, and you got to remember, people don't traditionally pay for Windows, so Microsoft has really shoved more. They don't call them ads, but they call them like promoted content or whatever else. As an example, one of the things they just finally started to address but have not fully addressed, in the start menu, there's a recommendation settings for your, usually showing files, maybe some various other bits, and you can't take control of that. So you open the start menu and you see things that, yes, they're yours or related to you, but you don't have the ability to either completely delete that section or have fine-grained control of what appears in there. And so that was another one of those little sticking points that's like, okay, let's go to Windows 11, but now I have all these other issues. And so they have addressed a lot of things, but they've addressed them in the most Microsoft way possible, where they kind of give you what you want, or what we always call, they give you 80% of what you asked for, but that remaining 20% that just never gets implemented, or it's just not done correctly.
Okay. So what is your personal view about Windows 11? Do you think that Microsoft has gone far enough to address the issues that people have been complaining about? Are you happy with Windows 11
Yeah,
as it stands, or do you think that there's still a lot to do?
I don't think there's ever going to be the perfect OS. Some people will say, "Well, that was called Windows 7," but then they're missing the sort of underlying infrastructure changes that are actually pretty important to the modern version of Windows that we know today. Windows 11 is fine. Most people should be able to run it without issues. There's people who are going to find nitpicking performance issues, but the reality here is that Microsoft's ending support in October of this year. So even if you don't like Windows 11, you either got to start paying money to stay on Windows 10, or you got to move. So regardless if your opinion is like, hey, it's great, yeah, you're kind of up against the wall.
Yeah. So Stardock, tell us a little bit about that, because I was having a look at the site yesterday, and actually I didn't realize that Stardock produces so much software. I thought it was just, just two or three different kind
Yes.
of productivity tools, but then I see, oh, there's a whole load of stuff there. So
Yeah.
we've
So
talked
we
about all this stuff with the start menu, the taskbar. Where does the Stardock set of products kind of fit into that story?
Sure. So Stardock, taking a little step back, is a company that is 30 years old. We've been around for as long as Windows has been really popular, for that matter. And there's two sides of the company. There's the game side, which we're not going to talk about because that's not the division that I run. And then there's the software side, and that's my division that I run. And so
Right.
there's a plethora of software, everything from what most people knew Stardock from back in like the early 2000s, which was window blinds, what allows you to completely overhaul the visual experience, to the more popular tools today, like Start 11, which is extremely popular in fences, and actually Multiplicity, which allows you to use multiple computers with a single keyboard and mouse on your own network. Are there probably our three biggest popular apps at the moment?
Right, okay. So give me an example of what I could do with Start 11. Why would I
Sure.
use it?
Yeah, so Start 11 allows you to take complete control of what we call the Start experience. So that includes the taskbar, and then that includes the Start menu. So there are, I think, 7 or 8 different styles. So if you want the Windows XP style, if you want a Windows 95 style, that we call a modern style. So it allows you to customize the Start menu from top to bottom, add things, remove things, and some of our newer items allow you to add things like tabs, group settings, multiple app launches, and so it just gives you an experience that you can build your own launch platform. And we basically say make the start menu yours and not what Microsoft dictates. One of the challenges, candidly, that Microsoft has when they're designing a start menu or a taskbar update is there's roughly 1.5 billion users of Windows. They have to consider all of those. When we build our software, such as Start 11, we can distill it down into what the individual user wants because we can add so many options. And realistically, if there's something you want to do with the Start menu, I'm almost certain you can probably do it in Start 11 because we started with a blank canvas with version 2 and then just started adding componentry in. And so you can mix and match and move things around and really make it personal. But the one thing that I think everybody would probably be like, really, you can't do that, that is available in Start 11, is you can pin folders to the taskbar. In Windows right now, you cannot take your downloads folder and pin it to your taskbar. You don't realize how convenient that is until you have your downloads folder pinned to your taskbar. And so you just click that folder and it opens into downloads. You can do this with any folder. We do it with our OneDrives and everything else. But like that is the type of functionality that Start 11 brings to Windows 11 that really elevates not just the personalization of the platform, but also the productivity of it as well.
Mhm. So is that something you could do in Windows 10 and they got rid of in Windows 11, or it's never
I don't believe
existed
you
in
could
Windows?
I don't believe you
Right.
could do it natively in Windows 10. You might have been able to do some workarounds maybe with PowerShell, but that's a real ugly sort of hack because then you get that blue PowerShell screen that pops up and says, I'm going to do this, and then opens it. But I don't believe you could natively in Windows 10.
I mean, I remember the days where you could really configure the start menu experience through group
Yep,
policy. And I think as we went through the kind of Windows 8, Windows 10 days, it became less configurable somehow through group policy. You had to kind of create an
correct.
XML file to list what you wanted there, and it was all a bit complicated and limited what you could do if you were a business and you wanted to have a uniform experience,
Yep.
for everyone. Does Start 11 help to address that issue in Windows 11 for
That is
organizations?
That is probably our most frequent use case for corporate customers is exactly what you described. So if you want to, you can customize the deployment of the native Windows 11 start menu, but as you just said, you've got to open a file. It's quote unquote coding, right? It's not a pretty drag and drop interface. Is it XAML that they use these days? GPO objects don't really work at too much anymore because Microsoft seems to be moving away from that. So what Start 11 is quite effectively a better mousetrap for managing the start menu across your entire fleet. So what you do is you develop a start menu, and it's just all drag and drop,
Mm.
pick your options, point your links wherever you want them, SharePoint sites, OneDrive, Dropbox, all that stuff. You develop a start menu, then there's an export button that kicks out a single file. And so what you do is on your endpoints, you install Start 11, and then we have an enterprise deployment tooling where you just point the link to where you want it to ingest. So you save that export on a SharePoint site. You go to your secondary computer, you put the URL or the file, whatever location of that
Mm.
file, and then when the computer starts up and logs in, it instantly ingests that file so the end user sees exactly pixel perfectly what you exported from your other devices. One of the cool things that you can do, and we have a lot of customers who do this, so they'll have start menus designed for, let's say, accounting, right? Accounting needs Excel, they need QuickBooks or whatever their things are, whereas
Mhm.
engineering might need Visual Studio, Chrome, Edge, Firefox for all that. So
Mhm.
they'll have individualized start experiences, I should say, for each department. But the neat thing is let's say accountants, you're getting rid of QuickBooks and you're moving to some other enterprise platform. When you update that file on the shared site, the next time explorer.exe restarts, it will ingest that file immediately. So you can effectively hot load a start experience onto an endpoint remotely. So the experience is like you update one file and you can update infinite number of endpoint start experiences uh, in a matter of seconds.
And does this work, for devices, for remote devices that only have access to the cloud, or
Yeah, so as long
yeah,
as they can access that file, so Stardock as example, we put it in OneDrive. So as long as the device has internet connectivity, it will be able to update that. Because that's the command is like it boots up or turns on, I should say, and then it looks for that file and then ingests it. And then there's failover protection too. So if they are offline or whatever and it can't find that file, it loads the last known good configuration. And in fact, you can even put a true backup of your start menu locally on the device that says like, hey, I can't connect to the cloud, load this one instead. So that way the user knows like, hey, some of like, if you're a real cloud heavy operation, if they can't access OneDrive, there's probably a pretty good chance Teams is not working either, or other Microsoft services, because they don't have internet connectivity. So you can load a different start experience so that user is aware like, hey, these things are not available at this time.
yeah. I mean, it's not that different, is it, from like the for people who are old enough, remember network file shares, and you basically, if you were an IT administrator, you had to
Yep.
make sure that that user share was available to them on their desktop. Otherwise, they
Yeah.
had no idea how to access their files, basically.
Exactly. That
So,
is,
yeah,
you're
yeah,
not far from it. It's
yeah,
all,
yeah, yeah,
we're not trying to do anything crazy, but we've just quite literally just built a simpler mousetrap for managing that part of Windows.
yeah, yeah. So let's stay on the start menu for a little bit. So Microsoft has an update coming to the start
Yes, they
menu
do.
very soon. Is that an improvement in any way,
I,
or
I
what's
I
going on?
don't fault Microsoft for what they're doing, right? They're putting first off, they showed off a bunch of designs that didn't make it, and the first thing we looked at was like, hey, we could go implement all those. Although they break a lot of core UX and UI philosophies that we try to avoid. Like you can look, there's just the way the layouts that didn't make it. But so one of the things I believe they're bringing, right, are folders to the start experience. And so you can click them and they expand and everything else. That's all fine. We've obviously had that since day one, but that's not why we don't think we sell Start 11 because people wanted explicitly folders, right? We offer so much more than that. It's like, okay, they now do that, but you still can't click the downloads folder on the taskbar, which,
Mhm.
as talking with our customers, is actually a huge selling point for what we do. And so I think it is a benefit, right? It's in Stardock's best interest to get everybody over to Windows 11 because we have a suite of tooling that is now updated for Windows 11. So I'm optimistic that Windows 11 will be just fine as long as the AI doesn't eat all of us first.
Yeah. So what about Windows 12? That
That's a
was that was a story. Was it a couple of years ago? And it just seemed to disappear.
So here's what we pretty firmly believe that Windows 11 24H2, they had a choice to say, is this going to become Windows 12? Because that's when they started introducing the AI functionality. The Copilot came to the desktop. We started seeing it layered in with Paint and even Photos a little bit. And so they made the choice that says, hey, we're not going to release Windows 12 or announce it, if you will, because that was going to be it. I think there was other reasoning. It wasn't because they didn't want to do it. Remember, Microsoft releases Windows 12. They will make more money getting people to upgrade. It is in their interest to do this. However, Windows 10 still had a year of support left. So they would have had effectively 3 operating systems in active support in the market at the same time, which isn't something Microsoft typically likes to do. And so
Mhm.
once Windows 10 clears the books here, probably in October 25th or whatever the date is, then I think we'll say like, okay, now it's time to learn about Windows 12, right? Or something like that.
Mhm. Mhm. Okay. So let's talk about some other Windows 11 stuff, and I guess I don't know whether this really connects into some stuff that Stardock does or
Sure.
not. I think some of it does. Virtual desktops. So
Yes.
these have always been a bit of a strange thing. It seems like a great idea if you've only got one monitor, for instance.
Hmm.
But in practice, I don't know. I've never quite got on with it. Is that because of the way it's implemented, or am I doing something wrong, Brad?
So here's the primary problem. You're not wrong
Yeah.
there.
Right.
Virtual desktops are a thing. They've been there. They got introduced in Windows 10, I believe. There was actually even like Power Toys, like way back in the day. I want to say for like XP
Mm-hmm.
that put these
Yep.
things in there,
Yep.
but they have not caught on. And we kind of know this because there was a bug with in Windows 11 with the virtual desktops with the transitions, and it just sat for a long time. And it was a very obvious one. It was the literal transitions between the two. Was the
Mm-hmm.
animation was broken, and they just didn't fix it. I think it's
Yep.
finally fixed after like 2 or 3 years of being in market. But I think the primary problem there is that when you take all your desktop contents and you push it somewhere else and you can't see it anymore, the user intuitively forgets that it's there. It is,
Mm-hmm.
in my opinion, virtual desktops are a power user feature, right? Even a subset of power users don't like virtual desktops because, again, out of view, out of mind, and that is problematic.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And so I think that's why they have not really caught on too much.
Right. Okay. What about the kind of switching Windows experience in Windows? Things like you've got Task View and Alt Tab. I don't know. Maybe I need glasses, but the previews are always too small, and I can't actually see what's in those boxes. And sometimes I'm
It's
switching
funny, they've actually gone
windows,
backwards.
and something that I've switched to, uh, you know, like the last task seems to have moved position, and it's all the way down there somewhere in the 20 open windows that I have. It never seems to quite work out for me either. Is there
Mhm.
something? Could they improve that experience as well? Trying to. I guess what I'm trying to say is, if you've got 20 tabs open, you've got 100 applications open, and it can be for me a nightmare just to find in that mess what it is that I'm
Mhm.
looking for. I know it's there somewhere, but where is it? How I get to it, and is there something that you think Microsoft might improve in that experience?
So it's interesting because they've regressed a little bit in that area. So if you remember, is it still in Windows? Nope. I don't know if it is or not. So if you remember in Vista, they used to
Hmm.
have I can't remember the name of it, but it was Alt Tab, but they were all turned sideways. It was like this 3D effect of like of showing
Ah,
all your
yep,
stuff. And I
yep,
believe
yep,
that
yep,
has
yep,
been
yep.
removed. And so
I
now they
see.
have Alt Tab. And to your point, it does get a little crazy, especially because one of the things that Windows does is if you're running Edge, this doesn't work with Chrome, but it also puts your last 5 tabs
Yep,
into Alt
yep, yep.
Tab. One of the things we did in Start 11 actually is the search. So if you hit, Windows key and start typing, we actually index those 5 open tabs so you can
Oh,
actually
that's
move between
fantastic.
them.
That's fantastic. Because it's
Yeah.
interesting. I had a conversation a couple of years ago with the guy who heads up Power Toy. Sorry, I forget his name.
Mhm.
And I said to him exactly that because they have a tool, it's some kind of additional search tool, which is kind of something similar to whatever Mac OS has. And I said to him, well, wouldn't it be great if you could just search
Yep.
all of your open tabs and just you know go to something from that search box, and you can actually do that within Chrome and within Edge,
Yes,
providing you're already in that application. Yeah,
correct.
but within Windows you can't do it. Yeah, and he said, well, there are all sorts of issues with that, which is why they haven't implemented it. So that's really interesting if Stardock
So it
doesn't
can be
manage to
done. We've done
solve
it.
that
It's
problem.
Yeah, it's now granted, it's
Yeah.
only the last 5, but for most
Right.
activities,
Okay. But
that's
yeah, yeah.
typically fine.
Right. Right.
Um,
Right.
we can't do more than 5 because I don't think Microsoft exposes them, if
Ah.
I
Right.
remember
Okay.
correctly.
Okay. Right. Right. Okay.
So,
Okay.
the one
Well,
other
that's really
other
interesting.
things that I would highly recommend people doing, it's a self plug, but not, is there's a tool out there called Everything. It's a very old search tool. It's by, I think, a company called Void Tools. It's called Everything. It is
Mm-hmm.
by far it's why we've never done search. It is by far the fastest search tool for Windows, and it searches everything. It is fantastic. So what we've done is we've actually integrated it into Start 11. So if you download Everything and have it running on your box, our Start 11 will use that search indexing tool and it display it within the Start experience, and it is infinitely better than the search that is out of the box from Microsoft.
Okay. That's interesting. Okay. Uh, there's also another Power Toys tool called Fancy Zones, and I don't think I've ever really used it, but I kind of understand what it does and what
Yep,
it's for. I can imagine people sitting in a stock exchange with 100 different
sure.
monitors or huge screens, and they need to see lots of stuff in a grid and to
Yep.
replicate that grid every time they start their device. Would it be fair to say that's similar to what Fences does?
No, no, no. Fences is so there's Fences does desktops, stuff on your
Right.
desktop. So the way we think about it, Start 11 does your start menu and your taskbar.
Yeah.
Fences does the literal icons that are on your desktop. So if you have like 15 PDFs on your desktop, you put them in a
Hmm.
fence and then they're neatly organized.
Ah.
Fences
Okay.
is a
Right.
desktop
Okay.
organizational tool, but it is
Right. Right.
insanely powerful. It is heavily used in healthcare and law offices. Because here's an example. One of the features of Fences is called a folder portal, and what that does is it replicates what's ever inside of a folder onto your desktop. As an example, if you put one of the law clients we work with, so let's say they have case A, B, and C all in OneDrive, they can
Hmm.
replicate that onto the desktop in a fence in 3 different fences so they can always be moving files back and forth. We actually have a company in Canada that we work with that all their entire company is deploying fences because it's a workflow productivity tool for the desktop. Like the fences are embedded in the desktop, and there's automation, there's deployment tooling. We just introduced tabs for it, and so if you have a messy desktop, like just files disorganized, Fences can automatically clean it up, or
Hmm.
you can do it manually. But it is Fences is incredibly popular. I think we just passed not too long ago 20 million downloads of it.
Uh-huh. Okay. Okay. Great. Great. So I think Microsoft started to preview this at some point in Windows, and then they pulled it, but it then ended up appearing in Edge, and that, or did it? No, File Explorer. I'll
Hmm.
correct myself there, and that is the ability to have tabs
Yes.
in applications. And I think they were
Yep.
planning to introduce that for everything across Windows, but for whatever reason, step back. I don't know why. Maybe you know something about that.
Oh yeah, no,
Why?
no. There's a story there. So
Right,
those were called sets,
right,
is what they were going to use. So this
right.
was
Yeah, yep, yep,
many
yep.
many years ago. So what Russell is referring to is we have a product called Groupie 2 that allows you to add tabs to any application. So you can have tabs combining Edge and Chrome. You can put tabs on Paint. You can have if you have an app that is in a frame, you can add tabs to it, and it's incredibly useful if you have multiple instances or groupings, as we refer to that. Like I have one grouping that I launched from the taskbar that will open Excel and PowerPoint and Word for products that we're working on. But Microsoft had a product called Sets that was going to do just that. But then it just never shipped and got canceled. I believe the reason for this was at the time when Microsoft killed off their Spartan engine that Internet Explorer was using. And I believe their
Mm,
tabbed
mm.
experience was being powered by that engine. And then all of a sudden, Microsoft's like, hey, we're not going to ship this. And so Sets died, and then they just never brought it back.
Right, right. So again, I'm going to make a comparison maybe rightly or wrongly, is groupie like sets.
Oh yeah, exactly.
Yep. Okay. Right. Cool.
Except that it's more way it's I mean, considering sets never shipped, so we don't know exactly what all the features of fun. I mean,
Yeah.
Microsoft showed it off and said, "Look, we're bringing tabs," and then just never
Yeah.
shipped it. So we can only assume, based on what they showed off in those brief clips, that it was very similar. And then Groupie has obviously had several years of innovation since then. So you can color coordinate things. You can have it automatically apply colors if it's a PDF or something like that, which I don't believe sets ever had, or at least they never showed off or anything like that if they got there.
Right. Okay. So do you think sets are ever likely to come back into Windows at some point, or have they forgotten
I
that forever?
It's dangerous to make predictions like that because you don't know what
Hmm.
Microsoft is doing. They brought tabs to File Explorer. Actually, they brought tabs to Notepad, but those are all app
Hmm.
specific. What Groupie would allow you to do is to combine File Explorer and
Yeah.
Notepad in a single thing. So whether or not they bring like a universal tab experience, that I'm not sure of.
Right. Right. So I'll come back to Stardock and all that
Sure.
stuff connected to Start menu and the desktop in a minute. I wanted to talk to you a little bit about the evolution of Windows and Copilot Plus PCs.
Hmm.
Yeah, or what Microsoft would like to be the evolution of our
Yes.
computing experience. So I don't know whether you have any experience of using a Copilot PC
Oh
or
yeah, I
these
do.
new features.
Yep.
Obviously, it's been a bit controversial with recall and all the rest of it, which I believe has now reached the stable channel, along with improved Windows search and click to do and a lot of these AI powered experiences that they would love us to be using. Do you think, is this, obviously this is what we're going to see happening with Windows over the next couple of years, that's for sure, I guess. Do you think people are as excited about it as Microsoft seems to be?
No.
Okay.
The thing
Is that
is,
going to be a problem?
um, Microsoft, in traditional Microsoft fashion, tries to sell AI and Copilot
Hmm.
as this thing you go talk to, right? It's the chatbots. We're all familiar with it, and those have utility. To me, the more exciting things is AI is this horizontal layer that exists, right? It exists now inside of Paint. It exists inside of other applications. To me, that is infinitely more useful than this thing called the Copilot chatbot that you got to go talk to and tell everything else. It's the lighting experiences. It's hopefully one day in search, Microsoft will do something better than Recall is certainly a thing, but their implementation isn't super awesome right now. And so Microsoft is very excited about it because they got to be, right? Everybody knows that AI is going in a direction, whether or not you believe it's a good direction or a bad direction, it's a direction that it's going. And Microsoft is throwing every spare dollar they have at it to make sure that their AI is everywhere. But their big catalyst here, or Achilles heel, is that obviously they're partnered at the hip with ChatGPT. And so it's like, yeah, it's their stuff, but they're trying to build their own models and it's not really Microsoft's thing. And so they've got an exposure point there and they're trying their best to kind of mask that up. But to answer your question directly,
Hmm.
Microsoft's far more excited about it than I think most consumers are right now.
But do you see a day where we'll be essentially driving our PCs with the help of an AI assistant rather than,
Yeah,
looking for
I think that's
things through the settings, app or even using a mouse to point and click for everything?
yeah, I don't know. Like, and the reason why I hesitate is Excel. Excel is so fundamental to every business on the planet, whether or not they want to admit it or not. Excel is like, can you imagine? And this is, I say this naively, that Excel running all the reporting and generating everything correctly. As of right now, that answer is no, because it's just
Mhm.
not there yet from the understanding capabilities. Will it get there? Probably. I mean, Microsoft just announced these agent things for Windows, which
Yep.
on the surface feels like what Cortana was supposed to do, but never got there. It's like, hey, my mouse
Mhm.
cursor's too small. And so now it knows what that means. And that was something Cortana,
Mhm.
while it did have these like hard coded actions, never truly really got over that hump. And which is why I keep saying it's this horizontal layer. All of a sudden now search inside of settings is so much better because of it. But it's not,
Mhm.
again, going to Copilot and saying, make my mouse bigger, even though that, I guess that probably would work. But it's more of these integrated experiences that AI continues to elevate, at least for now.
Mhm. Okay. Uh, Yeah, Excel is an interesting one. I mean, I'm not an Excel expert, but the few bits and pieces I've tried to do with Copilot inside Excel haven't worked out well.
No, there
Uh,
it's I
I
don't
mean,
trust it there yet,
yeah,
not even close.
yeah. I mean, the demos were impressive that we saw a couple of years ago, but the results, I mean, maybe if you had time to really get the prompting right, then maybe, maybe you can make it do something. But it's not what I'm in business to be doing. So, but yeah, it'd be interesting to see how that stuff develops. Uh, so going back to Groupie, all this sets.
Hmm.
I don't know if you have used or have, whether your customers are using things like, I don't know whether this is just for Edge or whether you can do this in Chrome too, is workspaces. And I find that
Mm,
quite useful, but obviously it
really
requires that you do
interesting.
everything within the browser. Yeah, and
Hmm.
essentially you group together a whole load of links connected to a particular project,
Hmm.
and that kind of thing. But yeah, I guess
Yeah,
that's
I'm
kind
still
of
old school on a lot of that. So we use like Jira is one of the things we use for our task
right.
management and all that. And
Yeah,
so we
yeah, yeah.
have a lot of online portals. I just have straight pin tabs. that's just
Right,
that's the
right,
way that I roll with that kind of stuff. And
right.
then being able to alt tab to a tab in Edge is what keeps me on Edge and not on Chrome because Chrome doesn't support that functionality.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Whatever happened? I mean, they still exist. Portable web applications. They're not pushed as much as they were. I used to convert the website. There was an option you can make this into a portable web application and then pin it, so it kind of looked like an application,
Yep.
kind of. But they seem to have dropped all the
It,
all the
yeah,
promoting
I
of
know
that
exactly.
recently. Hmm.
That was heavy, especially during the Windows RT days. It's like just install the website as an app, then you don't need the app.
Hmm.
And it's a solution that only exists because the problem was there. It didn't really
Hmm.
solve the core problem of not having a native app because you still end up with then like 7 different windows open of the same thing because you clicked a link that's
Hmm.
trying to kick you out to a tab and then all of a sudden the experience is broken and there you are.
Yeah, yeah. So, do people really need a desktop and a start menu anymore?
I would argue yes. It's there's too much productivity. Like you open up Visual Studio, how are you going to be doing all that? Does everybody need a desktop and a start menu? Probably not. I mean, I think we've already seen that evolution because right, most people do things on their phones, and so that is not a start menu. You could argue that is a desktop. It's a mobile landscape, and so that's a real app centric experience. Has already sort of determined like, hey, you don't always need a mouse and you don't always need Excel.
Mhm.
So there's definitely a mix and match scenario there for sure.
You And it seems to me that Microsoft is essentially making the start menu look more and more like an iPhone experience
Yep.
for
Yeah.
that generation of people who don't know how to cut and paste using the keyboard because they
It's a
literally
it's a
grew
very
up with
real thing.
PC. Yeah, yeah,
It's a very real thing that the newer generation does not understand File Explorer. That's actually one of the use
right,
cases for
right.
Fences is that you can put that content inside of what looks like a folder experience on the desktop, and then the user does not have to navigate the file structure within File Explorer, which they're not familiar with. So,
Yeah,
yeah, it's a real thing for
yeah.
sure.
And a lot of the features in File Explorer are maybe hard to discover. The fact that you can kind of pin files as favorites and
Hmm.
folders as they use some other terminology for it. I can't remember, but you can do that. I'm not sure that many people are aware that you can do that. And it's even compatible with cloud. You can pin stuff
Yes.
from Microsoft 365 as well. Again, how many people understand that? I have no idea. Also, things like the home button in File Explorer, if you've just saved a file, rather than go looking for it, if you could just click home, in theory, it should appear there in the list of
Hmm.
things you've just saved. Unfortunately, it doesn't always work. So, so it's one of those things that is a great idea if it were a little bit more reliable, but
Yes.
unfortunately, it's a little bit hit and miss. So, if I were educating people about how to use File Explorer, I'd be a little bit reluctant to show them that feature if
Yep.
because then I know they're going to get frustrated when it's like, well, Mr. IT support man, this only works, 6 times out of 10, so
Yep. As soon as you have to
so
explain why something may or may
yeah,
not work, you've already
yeah,
lost.
yeah, yeah, exactly. Okay, so if an organization, oh, so I'll get on to that in a second. So I've talked about, or we've talked about Start 11, fences, and groupie. Is there anything else that might be useful for an organization in terms of productivity?
Yeah, it's the app that I'm actually using right now for this podcast. It's called Multiplicity. So
Right.
we just shipped Multiplicity 4 in December, but Multiplicity is a product that allows you to have multiple computers on your network controlled by a single mouse and keyboard. So like in front of me, I have a laptop here. The box that Russell and I are talking on is a separate computer, and then I have one mouse that allows me to move between all these devices. Now, it does a lot more than just that, but it's we have our own protocol that we wrote in house, and all of our software is developed in house in Plymouth, Michigan.
Mhm.
But we wrote it all in house for high performance, low latency. And Multiplicity is used a lot, and I mean a lot, in emergency call centers where they have duplicate PCs for if one goes down, they got to be able to jump to another. So
Right.
it's extremely reliable, but it also has a remote desktop like functionality on your local LAN. We call it KVM mode. So I have just for building software, I have multiple boxes. Yeah, I could run all these things in a VM, but running software on metal sometimes produces different results than in a VM, unfortunately. And so what that allows you to do is you can stream a monitor from another device. So I have like test boxes in my basement, and so like I need Windows 10 24H3 or something, or 22H2 or something like that, or whatever. I can double click it. It allows me just think remote desktop experience, test all my stuff local on the network, and then I can just close it down or keep all these windows open. And so it's got that functionality. But the other one that I also use is if you have a desktop PC, we have what's called seamless display. You just put your computer next to it, and then you can make that an extended monitor with full fidelity streaming. Like you can watch videos across it. So if you have an old laptop, just put it next to your PC, and you can connect it up, and then you've got a secondary monitor right there. But Multiplicity is another heavy hitter for us.
So I was looking at the kind of offering, and is there some suite where you can buy a lot of this stuff together? If I understood, was it Object Desktop or?
Yes. So all
Yeah,
of our
yeah.
applications, all of our core applications, I should say, it can exist inside of a product called Object Desktop. So Object Desktop itself it's a SKU, it's a sales SKU,
Right,
but
right.
Object Desktop isn't necessarily a product. But you buy Object Desktop, and then you get all of the applications within our portfolio that we're supporting today. And so it's just one payment, all the applications, none of the fuss, used on up to 5 devices, and just makes the buying process, and it's significantly discounted from buying them all individually. And so it's just one purchase, get all the apps, and then you're good to go.
Right. Okay. So if somebody in an IT department wanted to test this out, what would be the best
Sure.
way? Is there a free trial, or how does
Yeah,
it work?
we do. There's free trials, there's demo keys, there's everything you can imagine from a modern software purchasing experience. They can either just email corpsales@stardock.com or email me directly at bsams@stardock.com.
Okay. In terms of the productivity, it can be quite a difficult thing for an IT department to justify spending money on something like Stardock, for instance,
Yep.
without demonstrating to the people that hold the purse strings that this is actually going to make a difference. Do you have any
Sure.
advice to give about
Yeah,
how an
there
IT pro might persuade the powers that be that they should spend money on this,
sure
and how
there's
they would prove some result from it?
Yeah, I mean, it's a very common question, right? Because it's like anytime you're deploying anything software related, it's like, well, what is the justification for this? It's a fair and valid. So, from the Start 11 side, one of the things that we, aside from like the massive easy deployment, what it allows you to do is to give the Start experience task from a senior engineer to frontline technician can now manage the Start experience. So, you no longer need to know the XAML to edit the configuration files. The end user, it can become a help desk tool at that point where they can go in and manage the Start experience from an individual user remotely and real quickly. So if you're operating across multiple offices, you just saved yourself travel time. If you had a senior engineer managing this, like we see in hospitals, you just gave that to a junior engineer, and you freed up one of your expensive headcounts, or employees I should say, to go do something else. The other
Right.
big thing here is that our software for the corporate world is not a subscription. It's a one-time cost. So you come in, and that is typically very surprising these days. So it's like, okay, I want to deploy Start 11 to my 5,000 endpoints. You buy the product, you buy the license, and then you own it. And so then it continues to work on Windows 11 until Windows 11 is no longer supported. And so that really helps that it's not an annual reoccurring cost, with the one caveat. We do custom development work. And so ongoing support for those custom development tools, as you would expect, could have an annual reoccurring charge. Like if you want something really specific that we got to support, then yeah, there's cost
Right,
associated with that. But the base license
right,
is a permanent key.
right, got it. Yeah, I think that's really good. You give very practical examples about how something like Stardock's software might
Yeah.
save somebody time. I think that's really important. Okay. So we were, if we go back to the beginning of this conversation, Brad mentioned that we hadn't spoken for a long time.
Mm-hmm.
So we know each other well because I was kind of working for Petri a long time ago as a freelance writer,
Yep.
and now I'm doing the job that Brad did.
Yes.
That was 3.5 years ago. Have you been at Stardock?
Yes, it's been almost 4
Yeah.
years, which is crazy. So if I remember
Right.
correctly, you were already at Petri before I joined, I believe.
Yes. Yes. Yeah.
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 So Russell was at Petri. I joined, and then I was doing Russell's job, candidly, for a number of years. And then this Stardock opportunity came up through a mutual friend. He said, "Hey, you want to come work at Stardock?" I was like, "Yeah, let's do that." And then so then Russell got promoted up through the food chain and took over my position and has kept the wheels running pretty well since I have left.
Okay. Yeah. And how's it going at Stardock? I guess you're enjoying the job.
It's yeah, it's I we fear so Microsoft, we fear patch Tuesdays because a lot of what we do, Microsoft, they don't break us very often. It's I shouldn't even say we really fear patch Tuesdays because of the insider program and because of our working relationship with them. We
Right.
typically know things are going to break, or we need to ship an update long before they are mass market. So we're talking like a year plus sometimes. So when I initially got there, I was like, man, patch Tuesdays could be really rough. But as it turns out, they're not so bad. Really, the crazy thing is just how often Microsoft ships update now. It used to be patch Tuesday, as Russell knows, but now there's A, B, and C and D week updates. There's out of band
Mm,
patches. There's a million different ways. But to actually answer the question, because I got on a tangent there, it's going well. We have grown as a business. We have evolved
mm,
as an operation. 4 years ago, when I started hearing about this opportunity, we were a very different company. I mean, internally and process flow and how we conducted business, and so I would say things have gone pretty darn well. And it's I'm lucky I get to. I like Windows, so every day I get to wake up. Unless I'm doing like accounting related work, every day I get to wake up and it's like I get to play with Windows. And if I see things in Windows I don't like, then we try to build products that evolve and shape that experience to be something that we think the community is going to enjoy as well. So
yeah.
I get to stay involved
Well,
with
yeah.
Windows is
Well,
is a
yeah.
good thing.
Yeah. Well, congratulations on that because it seems that Stardock has gone from strength to strength. For
Yeah,
people who are interested in your career, because it's, from what I remember, it's not conventional. From what I
yeah.
remember of your career path,
No,
um,
not even close. Not
and
even.
what you're doing now is very different from what I'm doing today and what you were doing in the past. So, what was the biggest challenge moving from being editorial director of Petri to general manager
Yeah.
at
So
Stardock?
when I was like my career has been really weird. So I started the shortest version of I can say is I started in accounting. Right, graduated college, went into compliance and audit work. Then I went back to school, got an MBA, and then I started my own company called Tracker, and did that for 3 years, actually, with the guy who I now work for in Michigan. Did that for a while. It didn't work out. That was like 3 years. Then I was running NeoN, which is a Microsoft focused
Yep.
publication. I was running that for a while. And then how I got connected with Petri was through a guy named Paul Thurrott, who Paul and I had met, through NeoN. He's like, hey, Petri needs some editorial guidance and leadership over there. Why don't you come work over here? And so then I came over and did what Russell was doing. But that job is a lot more than just, when I was there, at least editorial director, or what was I managing? I can't even remember what my title was. But we were doing things like we had the virtual events, right? This is during the COVID era. So there was a hard pivot to doing these virtual events that was, and webinars and all sorts of marketing experience, which is non traditional editorial roles. So I was more in the management area.
Yep.
And then when Windows 11 got announced, the guy who was the angel investor in my company, a guy named Brad Wardell, called me and said, "Hey, let's hang out again. Let's do some, have some fun and do some business. And can you come run the software division and help us do and get through Windows 11?" And so while it's non-traditional, I've always been a Windows fan. I've always enjoyed Windows. I've always used Stardock products for decades prior to even joining the company. And then I had a business background. And so it was like a unique marriage of running a software company is candidly not all that different than running anything else, like even what Russell does, right? Because Russell, you've got to line up content, you've got to make sure that there's a production schedule, you got to make sure, we call shipping apps, but you're shipping posts, right? And so when you break it down, well, yes, it was different, the how things get done, the fundamental process is the same thing. You have an idea, which is a news idea, you get someone to write it, you polish it up, which is our Q&A, and then you ship it. You just do it on a higher frequency than, say, an application, at the end of the day.
Thanks, Brad. I don't need to ask ChatGPT what my transferable skills are now. So you just told me.
It's like, it's you raise a very fair and valid point, because when I told my wife, she's like, "Well, that's very different." But then, like, when you break it down to what you're doing, it's
Mhm.
just my role at Stardock is very process oriented, and so editorial is very process oriented, and so that is how this all works. So yeah,
Well, if you ever move on from Stardock, Brad,
yeah, I was
just
gonna
say
say
a word for me, and I'll feel a seat there too. I'm just joking. NeoWin, I think it still exists. I think it's still
yes,
going
Neowin's still
strong.
thriving.
And the reason I say that is because lots of Petri's, competitors, if you like, no longer exist. In the last couple of years, with all the stuff that's going on with
Mhm.
SEO and AI and all this stuff with
Yeah.
Google, it's a tough world out there
Yes.
for websites like Petri, that's for sure. So I guess whatever NeoWin's doing and what Petri is doing is not so bad at the moment. You mentioned Paul Farott. I believe you still
Yes.
do some stuff with Paul.
Yes.
Maybe
Yeah,
talk
we
us
still
about that
do.
briefly.
Yeah, we still do a daily podcast. This started back when I was, at Petri, because Petri and Thurrott were joined at the hip, and
Yep.
Paul and I started doing a daily podcast. And it's most days. It's if I'm traveling, we don't stress to do it, but it's a 10-minute podcast every morning. And yeah, we still do that over on Thurrott.com, First Ring Daily.
Great, great. So where can people find out about Stardock?
Yeah, easy. Just Stardock.com. Or, all
Okay.
the social handles are at Stardock. So whatever fits your fancy, for lack of a better term, that's the easiest way.
And if they want to get in contact with you directly, is that
Yep,
possible?
just B Sams.
Yep.
If it's non-business, or whatever, just BD Sams. That's what it's on all the social networks. And then B Sams at Stardock is the easiest. Stardock.com, I should say, is the easiest way to get in directly in contact.
Great. All right. Well, thank you very much for giving us that overview of Stardock. I certainly learned something today, so I'll be having a look at some of those things more closely. See what good stuff you have going on there. All sounds great. Thank you
Pre-
very much for your time.
Appreciate it, Russell. Thank you.
Okay, and thanks everybody for watching, and we'll see you next time.